Hello and welcome to the Blockchain Startup Show. I'm Avan Dabash. As we embark on an unprecedented journey into the Metaverse, we find ourselves at an intersection of technology, imagination, and limitless possibilities. This digital universe is powered by VR, AR, and blockchain and is transforming industries and gaming, which is at the forefront of this revolution. Today, we deep dive into the heart of the Metaverse with Metagravity, a London-based startup pushing the envelope of blockchain and the Metaverse. They're tackling one of the most significant challenges: distributed compute infrastructure to support large-scale gaming experiences in the Metaverse. But we won't stop there. We'll explore the advantages of Web3 gaming, the potential of purpose-specific metaverses, and what the future holds for this ever-evolving landscape. Now, what exactly does this mean? To help us understand this in much simpler words, please join me in welcoming Rasheed Mansoor, who is the founder and CEO at Metagravity. We've also got Tobin Ireland, co-founder and CBO at Metagravity. Rasheed and Tobin, thank you so much and welcome to the Blockchain Startup Show. Now, Rasheed, I'm going to start off with you. How exactly did you get the inspiration for venturing into Web3 and starting Metagravity?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Avan. It's great to be here. In terms of what inspired this, I would say it's more of a very long journey. More recently, I've spent the time working on actual hard problems in concurrency around scaling large virtual worlds. My previous startup was working on that frontier. We set world records for the largest number of concurrents. It's a company called Hadian. And even before that, I founded a company called AdBrain, where with Tobin and a couple of others, we worked on problems in distributed compute that were related to data, but it set some of the foundational thinking around what would be necessary for the kind of large virtual worlds that inevitably will have to be made possible. I realized also, speaking to tech giants, speaking to gaming companies and publishers, that the timing was starting to become very critical for achieving the kind of infrastructure where you could build games and virtual worlds of arbitrarily large size, supporting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of concurrent users in single simulated virtual worlds. As such, it made a lot of sense to continue my work that had been about 20 years plus in the making and set up a company dedicated to solving the problem of scale, of low cost of use, as well as of performance and so on, in order to make these worlds possible.
That's interesting. Tobin, can you explain what Metagravity is exactly and what's the kind of problem solving that you're undertaking?
Great, thanks, Avan. I'll do my best. So Metagravity is building the fabric for the infrastructure of the metaverse in the future. We're solving for the problem of compute scale and simulation scale that has sort of constrained video game developers for the last 10 years plus in the industry. And as the metaverse has grown and is growing, the size of the simulation that will need to be supported is far in excess of what's currently possible on the infrastructure that's available for today. So specifically, we're solving for three problems. One is the scale of the metaverse. We will offer developers an infrastructure that will scale arbitrarily large, so there will no longer be any constraints to how large a game simulation can be. We're also going to transform the economics and the cost of operating games on the cloud and reducing both the cloud costs and the energy consumption and climate impact of running large-scale simulations in the cloud. And thirdly, we're building our whole platform for ease of use to be integrated sort of natively into all the tools and game engines that game developers are already using and love to use, and that will unleash their creativity in the future.
So Rasheed, what has the reception been like for the engine?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way I've often worked in the past and the way Metagravity is founded is we like to work from first principles. So we like to work from the perspective of how do we go back to foundations and rethink how to solve a problem. And the current state of the art in the industry for solving scaling of virtual worlds is essentially to take the world, partition it up spatially into sub pieces and then synchronize them in order to produce a large simulation. Now, that approach has had its problems. And given our approach is dramatically different and intended to solve the limitations of that approach, one of the great things has been when we talk to companies, when we talk to technology teams who have deep understanding of the problems around virtual worlds and scaling, there's a recognition that intuitively our approach sounds significantly better. As such, the reception to Metagravity on that perspective has been overwhelmingly positive. It's across the board. Top people in this industry, when they hear about how we're doing it, and we dive deep with them, they're extremely enthusiastic and motivated to be part of that pioneering journey. So I would say that despite us being a very new company and early in our journey, our early proof points plus the approach and methodology we're using is something that has resonated very broadly.
Tobin, can you shed some light on the traction and the projects in the pipeline that are going to be built using your engine?
Yeah, sure, Ivan. As Rash said, we're very early in our journey and we're quite a new company, and this is not an easy problem to solve. Rash has been looking at the challenges of distributed compute, for the last 10 years plus, and there's been lots of other companies who've tried to solve for cost and scale in game simulations. But we're really excited because we're so far ahead already in the technical roadmap and building out the platform, probably over a year ahead of where we originally planned to be at this stage. Our commercial strategy is to set low expectations and to over deliver. So we originally said that we were going to take a year and another year to get to a stage where we are revealing the power of our platform publicly and commercially, and before we open it up to commercial access. We're already working with third-party projects on demonstrating use cases of the technology. We've had large-scale demand and interest from all sorts of virtual world and metaverse applications, whether it be social platforms, AAA game studios, Web3 communities, as well as enterprise and virtual world simulations. And the beauty of our approach is that it's flexible to any type of use case and will just allow developers to build on a canvas which is not constrained by scale or cost in the future.
Got it. Rasheed, I'm going to come to you because I want to get in your take as to what you think Web3 games really need to do differently in order to garner mainstream attention.
That's a good question, Ivan. So the thing about Web3 at the moment is the current adopters and the part of the industry that's enthusiastic about Web3, they're more the dyed-in-the-wool believers. They are the enthusiasts. And for Web3 to be truly successful, they need to bring in the hundreds of millions, if not billions, of actual traditional gamers into that industry, and then going even beyond that to reach the rest of the 8 billion people in the world across all the different applications that the future of the metaverse promises. Web3 itself, in particular, the approach there with blockchain is essential for digitizing value, for making value transactional, for making it decentralized. And that is a capability the technology has. But at the moment, the forefront of the discussion is about the technology. And that obviously has to go away. Eventually, for the mass market to adopt the technology, they need to not care about the technology. It has to be commonplace. It has to be under the covers rather than being the point.
Right. And so, Tobin, do you think the metaverse would be these vast open spaces for people to interact, or do you think there's actually going to be purpose-specific metaverses that'll focus on different sectors, say education or healthcare, entertainment, etc.?
So great, Ivan. I hope I don't have to choose, because it's probably going to be both those things and many other things as well. As Rasheed said, we believe in an open and a decentralized metaverse where there will be lots of different companies and projects who will build applications which serve different use cases, both for consumer and for enterprise. It won't be controlled by one company. There'll be lots of innovation and lots of new experiences will be able to be built on the infrastructure of the future. We think there will be large-scale social places for interaction and winner-takes-all type of destinations who can provide the best content and the best experiences. There'll be smaller worlds where people will, niche communities will evolve and and build games and ecosystems of virtual existence into their virtual lives. And then there'll also be applications which are much more specific around enterprise functions as well. So the metaverse isn't one thing; it's not one technology, but it's a platform or a combination of technologies which will enable a new way for human beings to interact in the digital world.
That's interesting. And Rasheed, can you inform the audience about Edge of Chaos? That's the first game from Metagravity Studios.
Yes. It is quite interesting to us all too, Yvonne. Today, MMO games and such have serious limitations in terms of the level of interactivity you can have. For example, players engage with content that is very static and has been pre-designed by game designers and content producers. But when we think of a living world, that's not what you think about. You think of how players can enter a world and decide how to shape that world. Today, games can't really do this. And there have been a couple that have tried and have had to struggle with the technology limitations. The reason being, if you put players into a true kind of open world that you can interact with and change as you like, you need to deal with the concentration of players in different areas of AI beings. These concentrations can significantly exceed what current technology can do. Today, game engine technology can only support about 100 players in a single region. But when you say allow players to create a city in your world, you need to be able to support tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of players and beyond eventually. Edge of Chaos is designed to exemplify these kinds of things. It's designed to demonstrate what a game could be if the technology constraints around scale, cost, and so on are removed or reduced significantly. Then what could you do? So it's meant to be sort of a living world, a sort of medieval fantasy existence, where you start out as the character who's trying to eke out a living, but you have the potential to rise to be a feudal lord or a king in that world, or to rise to be a renowned hero. It's also then meant to serve as an exemplar for what our technology can do to motivate other designers, whether games or non-gaming applications, to give them a sense of the kinds of scale and interactions between players and AI that are made possible through Metagravity technology.
Well, on that note, it's time to slip into a very short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still tuned in to the Blockchain Startup Show. I'm in conversation with Metagravity. That's a company that's pushing the boundaries of blockchain and aiming to support metaverse scale gaming. Tobin, what do you think is going to be the inflection point that really leads to mass adoption of the metaverse?
So, Yvonne, we believe that consumer adoption of the metaverse is inevitable as in the future. But consumers, people tend to overestimate the impact of these technologies in the short term, but underestimate the adoption rates and the impact to humanity and to economies in the medium to long term. We saw that in Web 1 in 1999-2000 when people were trying to sell things online, but 28K modem speeds weren't sufficient to deliver consumer experiences which were compelling as an alternative to shopping. We saw that in 2008, 2009, when social media platforms didn't really take off until smartphones and 3G networks were ubiquitous and people could take their social interactions with them into the real world. And similarly, we see that the metaverse will only really happen when the technical infrastructure is in place and the customer experiences that are being built by game developers are so exceptional that they meet the expectations and the vision of what people have for the metaverse. That's not 20 years away. It's not 10 years away. It's going to happen much more quickly than people think. But one of the constraints at the moment is the lack of infrastructure to support simulations of scale at economic levels of cost that can actually unlock that creativity and deliver amazing customer experiences.
Got it. And Rasheed, what are your short-term, long-term goals for the company?
Yeah, that's a great question, Yvonne. So in terms of the short-term goals, in the next 12 to 18 months are aim is to demonstrate that our model for virtual world scaling works and is a de facto model that will deliver performance, scale, interactivity at the levels demanded by the next generation of games and metaverse experiences. And we will do so by demonstrating Edge of Chaos at gaming events next year, showing scale at a level nobody's seen before. The long-term goal, let's say over 5 years for us, is to be that underlying layer that drives the technology that other companies are building in the metaverse, supporting the kinds of 3D interactions and simulations and the scale that their experiences need. We also want to make sure that these metaverses are built in such a way that interoperability between these metaverses is a feature that is possible to turn on as and how it's required. Because at the end of the day, the metaverse aims to and needs to be interoperable and connected. It is essentially the next internet. Making that possible is fundamentally what we're aimed at. We want to be that sort of like the Apache web server for the internet, but we are doing this for the next generation of 3D worlds and immersive experiences.
Good to know. Well, I want to pause here for a bit. I want to welcome on board the COO and the head of investments for SGC, Ian Whitcop. He's going to join in now to share his perspective. Ian, welcome again to the Blockchain Startup Show. And I want to start off by understanding from you how the concept of metaverse is really going to change digital interactions going forward.
Yep. Great question. And it's great to be here with you, Yvonne, and Rasheed and Tobin. How has the concept of metaverse changed digital interactions going forward? So I think the majority of our digital interactions right now are very static. They're bounded by place, time, topic, length, and things like this. The paradigm is shifting from static interactions to more dynamic ones, experiences that are unbounded by time and place and topic. This shift is occurring at a time when we spend more and more time interacting digitally with each other. The metaverse is the fabric that is facilitating this paradigm shift from static interactions in the digital space to very dynamic interactions in the digital space that are more robust. That's number one. Number two is something like the metaverse. It can open up the people or the stakeholders that we have digital interactions with. So now we have, NFTs or something that allows for digital transfer of value on chain or within a metaverse. This now brings in the ability to have e-commerce on chain, and e-commerce is now looking, or e-commerce stores are looking at the metaverse as a potential source of distribution for them. So these become more robust experiences. Now, the key and what we've been talking about is scalability, and Metagravity is so important to solving this issue right now, because the more scalability you have, the more dynamic experiences that you have. The more dynamic experiences you have, the closer to real life you get, and that's what we're trying to get right here.
Ian, and finally, I want to understand from you, how important do you think it is to support open metaverses built on distributed technology rather than an iteration created by a big tech company?
That question is really a question of who sets the rules and what is the pace of innovation that will occur. So who sets the rules? In Web2, you have the famous walled gardens. If Google or Apple doesn't like your product, doesn't like your business model, they don't need to let you in their walled garden of app store distribution. And we've actually seen this with Apple and NFT stores. So NFTs actually are allowed in Apple stores, but they use the Apple payment rails, which take kind of the 30% cut. As we spend more time in the metaverse or digital interactions, as these interactions become more robust, you want to decrease the ability that a big tech player has to influence those interactions. So this is a key reason why you want open metaverses. And second, it comes down to the pace of innovation. If a metaverse is open sourced and has tools that external developers and builders can use to build businesses, you're going to have a much more vibrant developer ecosystem. If you have a more vibrant developer ecosystem or more developers, then more people are going to build businesses. The more businesses you have in the metaverse or on chain, the more dynamic experiences you have. So it's very important that one big tech player doesn't dominate the metaverse, and it's open to everyone.
Okay, so moving on then to my last question, I'm going to ask all of you. I'm going to begin with you, Rasheed. What role do you think India will play in advancing not only Web3 games, but the metaverse as well?
Yeah, of course, Avan, that's a great question. So when I look at India, what's really interesting is the amount of talent and skills that are necessary for the metaverse that are already there. So there's an emphasis on a lot of the lower level technology. And there are a number of universities like the IITs and so on that have had a focus on developing that kind of deeper hardware level, systems level knowledge. And that's actually necessary when we're building a completely new technology platform like the metaverse. This won't be built on the high level abstractions that have been developed for the web, simply because that lacks the things like performance, security, robustness, latency sensitivity that you need for metaverse experiences. That also goes for blockchain and the approach for decentralization. These again demand those more fundamental types of skills that engineers will need to bring to the table as we build out this next sort of phase. Then finally, there's the game development piece, and game development skills, whether that's art or design or development, is very, very important. And one thing that's very clear when looking at India is there's quite a large amount of expertise when it comes to game development. Most large AAA publishers and studios tend to have teams in India for this reason.
That's interesting. Tobin, let's get in your take as well. What's your outlook?
So, Ivan, I'm going to think of this as a consumer marketeer and state the obvious about scale of market and, very attractive demographics in India. 1.4 billion people, really powerful age demographics, growing GDP, high levels of internet penetration, mobile usage, access to information. All the signals are there that this is going to be a very big market for gaming and metaverse applications in the future. And it's already proved a market where there's very fast adoption of new technologies. AAA research tells us that there's already, India is already the second biggest market in terms of crypto in the world, in terms of numbers of participants in that ecosystem. And we think the metaverse, decentralized open metaverse, is going to follow those same trends. And India is clearly going to be one of the major markets of the future.
And lastly, Ian, do you have anything that you would like to add to that?
Sure. So first, I believe there's over 500 Web3 startups in India that are raised large quantities of VC funding that are working on problems, related to the value chain of Metaverse or adjacent or potentially be users one day, people like Polygon. So the quality of builders, as Rasheed mentioned, is very high. And I would expect a lot of these builders to migrate into more Metaverse focused projects. Second, from ethos, India actually has something called the UPI. That's the Unified Payments Interface. It's kind of a government-sponsored tech program where you can transfer value mobile to mobile using their banking system. And this has, they built this with kind of outside innovators in mind. They allow outside builders to come in, they open source their APIs, for example, and build businesses on top of the UPI. This is the same ethos that we would be looking for with kind of a decentralized open metaverse for a country to support. So the net is beyond just metaverse users, you have a lot of metaverse builders, and then you have a supportive country around this, or supportive government as well.
Okay, Rasheed, Tobin, and Ian, thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of the Blockchain Startup Show. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, it's a wrap on yet another episode of demystifying some innovative startups. We'll be back with another interesting startup next week. Till then, this is me, Avan Dabash, signing off.